L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim. We continue with the Mimer, Hasidic Discourse, that Rebbe said in 1961, about being holy and being great. We are speaking about Bali Tshuva, those that are ones who have a path of doing penitence, repentance, and we're speaking about tzaddikim, the righteous. And we don't mean the righteous in the person, but the service of the righteous. As we will see, that we have a relationship to both, or we can have a relationship to both. So, although the path of doing tshuva, of penitence, is a very lofty one, greater than fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs itself. Therefore, that the place where Bali Tshuva stand, where the penitent stands, even the complete righteous can't stand. Nonetheless, when it comes to the purpose of creation, the righteous fulfill that more so, because the righteous fulfill the purpose of Dir B'Tachtenim, of making a dwelling place for God in this low world.
The righteous? Just the righteous?
Again, the path of the righteous, not the person, the righteous, the path of the righteous, right? There's many paths, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about two paths, the penitent and the righteous path, right? Righteous path is you do exactly what you got to do. Torah mitzvahs, right? So with this, we understand then why, when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, our sages say the Holy Temple was built in the area of Binyamin. Now, Binyamin wasn't involved in the sale of his brothers. The brothers were, and it's the Beis Hamikdash is not in their territory, even though they did tshuva. So we say that the path of tshuva, penitence, is greater. So why wouldn't the Holy Temple be in their portion? Is because the idea of the Holy Temple is the divine presence of God should be revealed down here. It's about drawing down godliness, and therefore the path of the righteous, they draw down godliness. Right? That's their path, is to bring it down. Let's understand this a little more. What does it mean to be a Bal Tshuva versus a tzaddik? What's the difference? Well, a Bal Tshuva has a temperament that they need to restrain. Right? They have a temperament. What's the proof? They failed with that particular temperament. Right? They get upset. They get angry. And they failed. They got angry. Then they did tshuva. Right? They did tshuva. And what did they do in their tshuva? Is that now they still have that temperament. They just don't allow it to control them. That's what tshuva means. That's the concept of iskafia. Iskafia means to bend yourself. You're bending yourself. The righteous, they don't bend themselves. They've transformed themselves. The tzaddik might have had an issue of anger, perhaps, because no one is born righteous. You're born with the potential to be righteous. But the righteous, they're transformative. So they now transformed that attribute, right? That negativity. whereas the Baal Tshuva hasn't. And therefore, the Baal Tshuva, for them to do tshuva, they have to reach to a higher place. Because their nature is to follow their, inclination. To be able not to follow your nature, you have to be able to strive and to reach to a place beyond the human condition. Because human condition will dictate that a person who's got anxiety will have an anxiety. A person who gets angry will get angry. The only way you will get beyond that is when you reach beyond that. That's called beyond Seder Shtalshalos. However, what that means is it's not really you, right? Because you, person of anxiety, you, person who can gets upset, except you've now controlled that. Have you changed on the inside? No. I mean, completely changed, maybe somewhat, but you haven't really changed. Which means you can't draw it down and it's not you. The righteous path, on the other hand, have transformed. So that means they're a vessel for that light to be revealed here in them. Right? Which, therefore, that's why the righteous are the ones who bring the presence of God down here, or the path of the righteous bring the presence of God down here. Whereas the Baal Tshuva doesn't bring it down here in their condition, because in their condition, they still have anxiety. They just don't let it control them. They still get upset. They just don't let it, they don't allow it to ferment in their minds and think it, right? Do they feel it? Yes. Do they think it? When it comes, they push it away. That's called iskafia. It's bending yourself. So to be able to do that, they have to reach a higher place above, but it doesn't become incorporated down below within them, that higher place. That's why it's the path of the righteous that are going to bring godliness into this world, that it's integrated part of this world, because they've transformed themselves. Is that clear? Clear?
Not so much like what the path of the righteous is to do mitzvahs and learn Torah.
Right, but they bring the godliness in a integrated way into this world, that they create a dwelling place for God in the path of the righteous, not the righteous person now.
I always thought that everybody was responsible for bringing down.
Huh?
I thought that every Jew is responsible for making this a dwelling place, not just righteous.
Absolutely. Remember, we're not talking about a person, we're talking about the path.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now he's going to go and explain that. Just we have to remember that, because usually when we say the word righteous, we think of a person. Talking about the path of the righteous, not the path of those who are righteous, because as we will learn, we are all righteous, right? Now he's going to go into that and explain that. Okay. So it's about the particular path. In other words, when you do a mitzvah, you could do it as a Baal Tshuva, you could do it as a righteous person. Not as a righteous person, but as in the righteous path of, okay? So he explains. So it's no. Right? That every individual, whether they're a Beinoni or less than a Beinoni, which means they're not righteous, right? When they fulfill a mitzvah, they're called righteous. When you do a mitzvah, right? When you do tshuva, then you're a tshuva. When you do a mitzvah, you're called righteous. Why? Why would you be called righteous? So, an interesting nuance over here. And that nuance is that the Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, calls a mitzvah tzedakah. Now, even though there's 613 commandments, 248 positive commandments, but when it calls regular, the word mitzvah means tzedakah, right? In other words, tzedakah embodies all the mitzvahs, because all the mitzvahs are an idea of righteousness. And tzedakah means righteous, right? Therefore, the person who's actually doing the mitzvah, what are they called? A tzaddik, who's doing tzedakah, doing righteous. A righteous person who is doing a righteous deed. What is the embodiment of that is being charitable, right? That's the embodiment of it. But it means all mitzvahs. Therefore, the individual who's fulfilling a mitzvah is called the righteous because every mitzvah is righteous. It's an act of righteousness. Therefore, we can say that this idea of being transformative, remember, that's what the righteous are. They're transformative in their personal lives because whatever negativity they had has been transformed to something positive. They have no darkness in them. They have no evil lingering even in their hearts, right? That's what makes a righteous person righteous, right? So it's not just literally those who are of that quality because they've transformed everything from the inside of their animal soul, but it's you and I when we fill a mitzvah in general. So this explains further on this idea. Mitzvahs were only given in order that we should refine the world. And of course, we're part of the world, so self-refinement, right? So every time that you fulfill a mitzvah, you are, in fact, refining at least an element of your being. Now, the person who's righteous, they haven't refined an element, they've refined the complete person. We haven't, refined the complete person, right? That we don't have an anxiety, we don't get upset, right? And so on. We have that. However, when we fulfill a mitzvah, we are refining a specific part of our animal soul and body in the act of doing the mitzvah. Concerning that detail of me that has been refined, we are righteous. We have transformed. Complete transformation? No. Minimal transformation? Yes. I want to make sure that that's clear. Right?
I understand that.
Perhaps we cannot. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
understand that when you do a mitzvah, you're following the path of the righteous when you do a mitzvah. When you learn Torah.
And in a certain way, in a certain detail, we are righteous.
Yeah.
In a certain detail of us, we are righteous in that moment.
Right.
A certain element of us has been refined, has been in a transformative way.
Yeah.
Which means when we learn, we got to learn in such a way that that it's transformative, right?
I think we mean learning.
Yeah. including learning. Learning is a mitzvah. Yes. So in one way we can understand it in the way the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. The Rebbe doesn't explain that here, but I'm going to give this explanation. Is remember that a candle, there's the fuel, right? The wax or the oil, metaphors with oil. And then there's the wick, and then the light that it produces. The light that it produces is a godly flame. So when we do a mitzvah, we need oil, which oil in the metaphor is mitzvahs. In other words, it's the fuel that will create the light of God in our lives. And it needs to go through a wick, though. The wick is the body and the animal's soul, the body. In other words, to do a mitzvah, you need a body, right? To extend your arm to give charity, to put on tefillin, to light Shabbos candles, right? You need an arm for that, to fulfill the mitzvah, to do the mitzvah. So, but in the metaphor, the wick, what happens to the wick in order that there should be a flame, the light of God that we produce through the act of the mitzvah, is that the wick has to become darkened and charcoaled and black, right? It becomes actually nullified, right? If it stays white, will you have a flame? No. Flame will go out. But only because it becomes charcoal, it becomes naught. It holds to the flame. Meaning, what's becoming naught? Your body. How's your body becoming naught? Because your body only cares for itself, right? It wants comfort, it wants pleasure. In the moment that you do the mitzvah, it becomes naught, because it's not. See, it's now part of the mitzvah, right? It's part of the mitzvah. Meaning it's being nullified to something, right? Being refined, and through being nullified in that moment, it becomes part of the mitzvah. So it's not just your soul that's enveloped in the light of God when you reach your arm out and give charity, right? And put a coin into the charity box or whatever, right? It's not just your soul that's bound up with God. Your arm is bound up with God. The physical arm in that moment has a refinement. It's bound because the physical arm naturally just wants to do what's comfortable and pleasurable for it, right? Whatever that might mean. Wants to throw a ball and have pleasure of playing. And here it's now being transformative. It's not being itself. It's now being, by not being itself, by the darkened wick, right, that is becoming nullified, right? And the wick eventually gets completely consumed. But in the moment, that part that's being consumed is what creates the light of God. In other words, by the body and the animal soul not being what its nature is, it's been transformed in that moment. In that moment, it's transformed in the act of doing the mitzvah. It also is an agreement to do it. Because if your animal soul had such control over you, it wouldn't give you the permission. It wouldn't have the will to fulfill the mitzvah. But in that moment, it's saying, Amen to the mitzvah, engaged in the mitzvah. That's transformative. So much so that it creates the light of God that imbues the person in that act of doing the mitzvah, in the very act itself, not the intent, the act. So in that respect, there's a refinement. And as the Rebbe explains over here, there's a refinement in a certain element of the individual, right? That is like the way of the righteous.
Transform.
That we transform a certain element of us in that act, which is very powerful, very beautiful. Clear?
Yeah, the psychiatrist can't do that.
Hmm?
The psychiatrist can't do that.
Your psychiatrist can't do that.
No, he can't.
No.
He's a nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah, but he can't do what a mitzvah can do. Exactly. All right, amazing. I hope that was clear. It's very nuanced, but very beautiful idea.
Very fair.
All right, wonderful. All right, folks, we'll see you by Chumash Harashi soon. Thank you for joining.